So where does this rank in the scheme of doing things for us as a council? We make a decision to have a community center.
Yeah.
And we get a committee to work on the concept of a community center.
Yeah.
Where does this fit in?
So this is really in the generation of possibilities. So for example, I was meeting with Dan Park, and they did quite a bit of consultation and brought in people's wish lists about what they would like to see in the community center. And then they put forward 2 or 3 proposals, right, of what City Council might approve. This will generate actually hundreds of proposals, but it will shortlist it to the ones that are going to get the most community support. And then Council can take that information, consider it, and it will be useful in deciding which plans they would want to proceed with.
So it help you set perhaps some parameters around.
Haven't we already done that? For example, we've made the decision to have a community center subject to financial.
Yeah.
So
this is part of the public process, Jack. We're
I thought we
on the
had
next
a
level.
public process.
No, we've indicated that as a next step, we're going to until September approximately, that we're going to have a series of events that will be the public process, trying to measure let's say the choices that the community really wants to see, whether it's cost, whether it's size, whether it's shape, whether it's form, all that sort of stuff. And this is a potential tool that could be used in that process. I mean, one would be having public meetings and open forums and all that sort of thing. This is both public and online, but brings back a quantitative analysis of the choices that the community could make. I mean, depending upon the participation of people who live in it.
I guess what I'm asking is,
that's
who makes the decision? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, well, that's
If you're going to base it on,
for you.
if public policy is going to be set by the masses, we're out of work.
Well, we make the decision
Well,
at the end.
we made a decision, right? So we're out of work.
Oh.
The decision's being made by.
Perhaps John will clarify. Yeah.
I think that the point is that this would give us a look at, would help us make we ultimately do make the decision. And we made a decision to move forward with this, but we haven't made a decision on what it is. And if this was part of that process, then at the end of it, we would see that at the average satisfaction at this end of the scale for this kind of facility is great. Now, there's obviously still going to be a bunch of choices within there that we have to make. Ultimately, we have to decide which of the 1,000 outcomes works for us.
Oh, so let me bring it down to a little lower in sort of our expectations, but it seems to me that people would like to get something built, for example, as a community center, for nothing. Like, we don't want any cost, we don't want any operating cost. We'd like it to be handed to us on a site provided by us. And that would be the end of it. So that would be your, I can tell you, that would be the first financing arrangement. So that it's really a question of who makes the decisions. That's really what I'm trying to get at. I mean, we've been elected to make decisions. And if you go out and say, well, what do you think about, I don't know, three architects' views of potential building? People who know nothing about architecture are going to say, I think we should choose this one because it looks pretty. And that's the wrong thing, in my opinion. So I don't know where we're going with this. I mean, I know you're using the community center as an example.
Yeah.
I understand that. But where are we going with this? I mean, that's really.
I think in making this decision, council is going to receive many reports of professionals that are going to give information that is pertinent to the decision. I think this is best viewed as a report that's going to give information that is relevant to your decision-making process, that helps you select between the various options that are on the table and make the best decision for you. It's not going to determine your decision. You may choose not number 1, but number 3 for different reasons, right? But you'll know going in what type of response that might generate from you, because we'll have looked into it, and the decision will remain council's, but it'll be a well-advised decision.
Trying to be as objective as possible and sort of trying to get heads around this concept relatively quickly. Is there a way, being very objective, it seems that if you have 1,000 different permutations and combinations, it may deter people and scare people from that process.
Right.
Is there a way that specific to, say, the community center issues, is there a way that we can narrow that down so that it doesn't seem like such a burden,
Yeah.
or such a
The influence, the engine takes all of those variables and it's creating those. So no one would actually be looking at 1,000 variables, but because in the ideation stage, which is where we get the expertise of the people who actually have been working on this for a long time, plus whoever else in the community that wants to participate in looking at the various options and applying what values would best, which options would meet which values the best. There's all that kind of upfront work that's done to inform what goes on to the online portion. So when I come in as perhaps a less informed person, I haven't been involved with all the reports and all of the design and discussion, but I could take that values wheel and pull down the values that are really important to me. So if affordability is very important, if a space where people can connect socially would be important, then what this program does is it will generate the options that best meet those values. So I can see, oh, those are the top best, options for me. But everyone, let's say 1,000 people did this, everyone would have, their own ranked list. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the information you get back is pretty robust metrics about, which option would have the most community support going forward. So I think for you as the decision makers, you just have really firm ground to stand on as you move forward and putting up the RFP and going forward with the design. So we see this sort of as a support to you in your decision making process. And it's also great for council to be able, for the community to say, oh, look at where we stand collectively, given all of the values that we hold and all of the possible permutations. Isn't that interesting to see that this is what would give us the best result?
You've used the community center as an example of how the system works, but are you proposing it could go forward on something as narrow as the community center?
Yeah.
Because when you did the presentation, you were talking about the full meal deal.
Yeah.
But I guess we've had a committee working for 3 years, and they've actually presented a concept. And this is much broader and almost gets all the information at the beginning as to what is it the community would like to see in a community center. So does this work for just going forward with that one option and saying, what do you think about this concept?
Oh, so there is already.
Yes, we've had a committee working. Well, there was a committee that Dan was on that came up with a recommendation, and another committee struck to sort of say, okay, how do you go forward with the first phase? And they come back with a recommendation, and we've endorsed in principle that particular concept to go forward for public consultation. Yeah. So this to me is the types of questions and things in there are, okay, if the public says they don't like that concept and they don't think it's feasible, then you've got to go back to the drawing board. And this is the best drawing board tool, not. But then back to my other question, I didn't quite catch the comments about cost at the beginning, John.
Oh, so what we're suggesting is that we would like to make this available irrespective of cost.
In other words, for free.
Yeah, if we could get support in doing advertising and helping have some spaces, we would be able to have more participation and more accurate results. But in terms of the bulk of the cost, in terms of time and facilitation, we would absorb all of that. So it's just the cost of a bit of advertising and having spaces for people to gather.
And the time frame?
By the end of the summer.
The actual interface, so
Yeah.
that people can actually use this, would be ready by mid-August, yeah. We wanted to just pick one issue and just show you how it could be broken down. And what we'd really love to hear from you, or that you might wanna think about is there an issue that you feel that this process could help you make a good decision based on community input? So it's entirely up to you.
Well, I'm just nerdy enough to get really excited about this kind of thing. And we are going into a public process on the community center. My suggestion would be that we ask Public Forums to make a presentation to the community center committee. And if the community center sees value in this, that if they do have some budget, and if they can work this into their budget, then I think it could be a very valuable exercise.
And what we gave you was just like, we pulled things out of the hat from 4 years ago, just so we could show you how the variables kind of work together, but we could work with whatever, wherever you're at in the public process.
Okay.
Being not particularly computer literate and having that handicap, I nevertheless see a great merit in having a process like that at least tried. So that I would not forgo, especially if we can get it for free. But even if it would not for free, I would say it would be worse, a modest expense just as a trial. Would the community center the best test case? I doubt it. And I share Alice and Councillor Morris's thought about that. Too much work has been. There is nothing which hasn't been explored. We pretty much know the needs and so on. What hasn't been explored, how it can be afforded. It's all boils down to money.
Right.
And your process will not help us to find the money. Because
Can I speak to that?
Did you say it will help us or?
no, I can't see it, because the money which we really need is massive government grants,
Yeah.
which no matter how the process will work out, will not decide if we get them or not.
Right.
And we know what we can afford, and no matter what your process. So I see this public forums process most valuable to gauge people's values.
Right.
And this community center is not driven by values. Monetary values, yes. But other values, we all want to have a community center, we want to have a gathering place, we would have a place for arts and culture and recreation. This is not a matter of values. The ferry marshalling could have been one, but maybe it's easier to deal with that than what your process would warrant. If I see a major benefit is we will have the economic development study, which touches on the community's values. What do they value most? We are getting almost into a visioning thing. What kind of community do we want to be? That's where you really explore people's heartstrings. Do they cherish community and diversity, even if it means more density? Or do they forego, let's say, a more holistic community and they go for exclusivity? That's a value system. Do they like jobs, because jobs provide community, or would they say, well, we are quite happy to import whatever? That's a value system. And none of council, I would not be comfortable to make those judgments for the public at large. So
I think you're right, we're not certain about which values are maybe most widely held. and then how those values get expressed. You know, like what decisions do we make based on those
Exactly.
values?
Roger Curtin, do we trade density for conservancy in park? Who decides?
Yeah.
I mean, I've listened to that debate now since I came to Bowen Island. Who decides? We had a decision, and in hindsight was probably not the most enlightened one. Will an opposite decision be more enlightened? It's enlightened or not in the eyes of the beholder. So I don't know what the eyes tell us. So, sorry.
So
Yeah, no, please.
I would just be curious to know what other sort of issues you think might be useful.
I share Councillor Dunce's opinions in this, and I'm not nerdy, but I immediately saw this concept and realized that it had huge value to us as councillors to try and take the temperature of diverse groups, and that's one thing we have on Bowen Island, and come up with a mathematical result that is unchallengeable. Everybody has to stand by it, and that's a key element, I think, to anything. So it's, and it could be applied to a whole series of things, and one would be something about density in Cape Roger Curtis, very marshalling, some of the values that we're going to use on the Snug Cove plan. So I think it's just a case of, I like the idea, I totally support it. I think it's just a case of finding out something that we collectively agree is worth putting to the test. And I'm not sure that the community center is out of bounds because we've approved concept B, because at the end of the day, if the community as a whole collectively is so dead set against the amount of money that's going into it, and wants a $3 million facility, period, then there is no other choice other than to redesign or recalibrate how we go forward on it. And I see that as being potentially a valuable piece of the information gathering that we're going to be doing. So,
John,
So just in terms of how it might apply to the community center process and this cost constraint, so the proposal that's on the table now has got a certain price point. But if that amount of money is not available, what's the compromise? What's the next best thing? With this, you'll be able to say, well, what's the best community center if we put $2 million in? And it'll give you a result. What's the best community center if we put $3 million? It'll give you a result. It will do all those trade-offs in terms of applying people's values to different cost constraints. So it will give you flexibility at the end of the day if you say, well, actually, we don't have $6 million for community center, we have $2 million. What's the best we can do for $2 million? You'll be able to look at this based upon what's happened over the summer, and it will give you a reliable result. So you have that flexibility at the end of the day to make the best decisions.
Andrew?